A few days ago, I got to sit down here and have a really good visit with Deb Greenough, one of the all-time great storytellers in rodeo, one of the happiest people I've ever been around. We talked a little bit about life, we talked a little bit about rodeo, and we talked a little bit about life after rodeo. Hope you enjoy it. I'm Wade Sankey. This is the Sankey Rodeo Show podcast from the cabin right here on the ranch in Sankey, America. It's not going to get any better than that. You just will go. The hell you been doing since rodeo? One of my biggest pet peeves in life is that people quit rodeoing and then they disappear.
That is a funny thing about that. Of course, when I was rodeoing all the time, my mom was remarried and lived in Denver. And after I'd quit rodeoing, her and Bill ended up moving back to Powell. Bill was retired and everything. I seen them more when I was rodeoing in Denver than I did when they were in Powell after I quit.
Yeah.
And that is the tough deal about it. Geez, I tell you, the guy gets so spoiled in that business. You're going all over the country, seeing things you probably normally wouldn't have seen.
Yeah.
And making friends everywhere, and then plus the guys that you compete with and stuff like that. You see them all the time. You take it for granted. I guess that's the way life goes, though. But I miss it. Yeah.
Yeah. So why is that? I mean, why do people fall off like that? That's something that really bothers me. I can think of 1,000 people that I have no idea what they're doing right now. And luckily, you just live close enough that we know what you're doing.
Well, yeah, and that is a good deal. That's a good blessing there. I have no idea. I think it's not that you're tired of traveling. It's not that you're tired of the life.
Yeah.
I guess how many of the kids we graduated with or went to high school with are we in contact with every day?
Well, we didn't like them.
Well, I went to school in Fromberg. I tell you what, of course, I was able to graduate in the top 10 of my class because there was only 16 of us. But yeah, if you didn't get along with everybody, you was kind of short of friends in old Fromberg, Montana.
Yeah.
But no, it is the same thing. I mean, there's a few that we do stay in contact with, but it's not every day, well, of course, not every day. And I'm probably guilty as anything. Shoot, Marty Buckingham, one of my old traveling partners, if that guy, he'll touch base with everybody all the time. There's personality deals like that, where people give a phone call and whatnot. And, a person just needs to get better at that. But, well, believe it or not, I'm getting to that age now where a lot of them have disappeared.
Really?
A lot of, some guys that I graduated with. One of my best friends in high school, he died, 12 years ago, or 22 years ago. At 40 years old, cancer.
Yeah.
Another friend from high school was killed in a car wreck, and there's a couple others that have been gone.
Yeah.
We've lost some guys that we know in rodeo. Gee whiz, Bud Longbreak not too long ago, Gary McDaniels, a lot of them.
Yeah.
And that happens, and that's where you're kind of like, whoo. So that's why, being able to come up here and visit with you is always good. And like you say, we are close, but it gives a chance to kind of touch base before it kind of comes to that final day where we're saying goodbye completely. And Chuck Logue, oh my gosh, that guy, he had an independent insurance adjusting company. And when we started getting a lot of them storms up here and hail and snow, he hadn't been up here for 3 years now, but shoot, for 3 years, that son gun, he's coming up here just doing adjustments, and man, it was good. Just hadn't changed a bit.
Did you get tired of him?
Never. Never.
One of my favorite stories that I've ever heard Ike tell is, I guess, Bob was the director in the bareback riding.
Yeah.
So I'm going to retell this the way I remembered it. But I think Bob's the director. They're going over some major subject somewhere they're going to vote on. There's a big meeting going on. And I guess Bob's up there being professional. And Bob, for everybody else, is Chuck's brother. And Bob's being professional, saying this is what's going on, and this is how it's going to happen, and this is why we're doing it. And I guess there's Chuck in the back, and he's got a beer in his head, and he's just screaming, "That's bullshit, Bob, and you know it."
and half the time he had his cup sideways or his beer sideways, just poured on the floor. Chuck did.
What a
He was, one time he was staying at the La Quinta in Billings. Calls me up, Deb. He says, I'm down here at the La Quinta. He says, come on down and meet me. I said, shoot, yeah, I'll be there. So I'm not far from there, you know. I'm just kind of in between Billings and Laurel. And then the La Quinta's right on the interstate. So I got down there and I'm kind of driving along. And here's this car trying to get into the parking lot and pulls ahead and kind of stops, pulls ahead, kind of stops. And I'm looking. Well, here's this guy on his cell phone. Kind of great. I hadn't seen him for a while. It kind of looked, and pretty dark complected like Chuck. So it kind of looked like like a Mexican kind of fella. And I'm like, man, who is this guy? And he just kept walking. He'd kind of go about halfway across the driving lane. Then he'd turn around and go back the other way. Talk no different. That's the way he told stories. Back of it, my God, that's Chuck Logue. Finally looks up. This car needs to get by. I got pulled up. Yeah, you're blocking traffic no matter where you're at, aren't you, Chuck? Because he get to talking and talk bucking horses 24/7, all the time. But
and
Chuck
doesn't
Logue.
care. Yeah. Who else do you keep in touch with?
Oh, Cleve. Believe it or not, he's probably the same as I am. Every so often we get a hold of each other, and visit a little bit. And the Miles City Bucking Horse Sale, head over there and get to see him there. He's bringing horses there now and whatnot. And Clint quite a bit, like I say, but we're right here. Clint Bronger, over there in Roscoe. Dan Mortensen, you never know where you might see that guy.
Yeah.
But Dan, he's always been pretty quiet and whatnot. But shoot, when you see that son of a gun, man, I tell you what, he talks more than he ever used to.
Yeah.
He never says a whole heck of a lot, but no, he looks good. Scott Bredding, see him quite a bit.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Quinn, my oldest boy, and Parker are the same age, and they stay in contact all the time. But, well, there you go. You got them cell phones and people know how to run them so much better. Facebook and various things like that. And just never have really picked up on that. And but, no, oh, gosh, dang. Well, and then kind of ended up painting hip numbers at the horse sale there in Billings, and a couple years ago, and heck, I've really enjoyed that because you never know who you're going to see. Shoot, Canadians come down, run into Devin Lowry, just the other day. Shoot, one day, kind of walking through the alley, we had to go down, paint some hip numbers on a bunch of mules and everything. Shoot, they had 15, 20 of them out there instead of bringing them all up. They make me nervous anyway. You just don't know. Oh gosh, and all of a sudden here's this guy. I said, Deb, how you doing? Good. And of course I was hurrying, so we could get this job done, following the brand inspector. And I turned around and I looked. This guy had sunglasses on. I was like, man, I should know you. And he said, are you losing your mind that bad? It's Tom Reeves.
Oh, really?
So I just started laughing right away because he had them sunglasses on. Of course, the older we get, cheeks fill out a little bit more. And Tom, he was always pretty wiry. And besides that, remember, he always had a pretty squawky voice. Tom, sorry about this, but I'm telling it the way it is. And his voice even deepened. You might have to hit the button. But I looked at him, I said, well, shoot, you look good. Did your nuts drop or what? Well, he gave me a hard time. I had to fire back.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then Britt Givens, you see quite a few people there. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's a way to stay in the life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are you doing now? You're shoeing horses.
You know what? The one thing that made me want to rodeo so bad. Shoot, when I was younger, of course, Dad, he shot a lot of horses. Still does today. 87 years old. He's still shoeing horses. Gosh dang, that guy's cut out of a different cloth than a lot of people, I think. I don't know, but
that's ridiculous.
But no, that's what we do. And I can remember, shoot, we was down at this ranch down in Wyoming, and been shoeing with him during the week, trying to make enough money to rodeo again. He always paid me, Oh my gosh, and man, he's faster than anybody I ever seen. And I'd be finishing pulling shoes, and then he, of course, then he'd get the shoes on all 4 feet with just a couple, about 4 nails. And then I'd come by and he started teaching me how to nail. And I was bent over all day, never stood up. We go up to this ranch and I said, Dad, how many we got today? Oh, just 16, he says.
Jeez, just the
Holy
two
cow,
of you?
60. Yeah. And he'd do that many by himself,
Well,
you know.
yeah.
I mean, just crazy. So we get it. We get up there, and I tell you what, I learned a couple lessons that day. Boy, I tell you what, I counted every one of them horses coming out of the kraal, and finally there was the last one. And I mean, man, Wolf Point and those are coming up this weekend. Man, I'll tell you what, I'm tired of this bent over all day stuff. I counted everyone. That number 16 come out, and boy, when it was done, everything was done. That rancher come up and he says, Billy, he says, Dadgummit, he says, I forgot we got two more. You got time to do them? My dad said, sure. I tell you, I learned never count. You keep your head down, butt up until there's absolutely no more horses. Because once you quit in your mind, you're done. You can't hardly get it back. So I learned a valuable lesson there. But you know that's just a part of the life that we live. You know, in the ranching, farming, agriculture, rodeo world. You know, sooner or later you've got to you got to bear down. Yeah. And that's what it's all about. So you know, it's not just the riding a buck and horses and that. That's a big part of it, but just the life that you learn and all along the way is fantastic.
Yeah. So how old were you? Like you talk about being entered in Wolf Point or looking forward to rodeos. How old were you when you were shoeing those horses, and when did your rodeo career start? Like we gotta talk sometime about the whole Greenough legacy, because I remember being a kid and watching a movie or a film that talked about Turk and Alice and all of that back in the day. And man, I haven't heard about that for a long time.
Yeah, Michael Amundsen actually did that movie, and I think the one you're talking about is called Take Willie With You. Yep. And shoot, he worked on that for a couple years, in fact. But
and so what was that? What's the premise of that?
It was just a lot of the stories. I mean, gosh, he just kind of knew about the family. Heck, he knew more about the family than I did. Really, to me, I guess. Well, they would have been my great aunt, great aunts Marge and great aunt Alice, just because they were my grandfathers.
Yeah.
Bill Greenough was my dad's dad, and then Turk, and really never called him Turk because he always had us call him Uncle Fuzzy, and then a lot of the family.
So who was Alice? Who was you just said her name? Marge, and who was Turk, and then where's all this fall in line to you?
Well, there was Turk, Alice, Marge, and Bill was my grandfather.
Okay,
that's my dad's
brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And then not far from where we're at here on your place here in Elbow Creek.
Yeah.
In the Beartooth, there's a lake up there called Greenough Lake.
Yep.
That would have been their dad, Pack Saddle Ben.
Really?
Yeah, and he used to stock a lot of those lakes up there, and a lot of the trails on through the mountains back in the day before there were roads, he'd created.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where the family comes from.
Yeah.
And then
where'd they come from before that?
Missouri. But great grandpa, actually, there was 3 brothers, and my history isn't that good on it. And, that's because dad's really wasn't. But there was 3 brothers, and Pack Saddle Ben Greenough, was one of them. They were all kind of in an orphanage. And sounds crazy because, then they would work, and great-grandpa was delivering newspapers, I believe. And he was only about 16 when that was it. Had enough and got out of there, and he came. I think one of the brothers stopped around Missouri.
Yeah.
Because I know Dad told me about him and Grandpa being in Missouri doing some ranching there. But Ben actually come into Red Lodge, and so Grandpa Bill and Dad, a lot of their earlier cowboying days, when Dad was just a little guy, was on the Little Horn Ranch there, but Hardin, the Bighorn Mountains and all that.
Yeah.
It was pretty open country back then, of course, So that's kind of where they were at. And then there was one other brother that I really don't know for sure, but I know there's some Greenoughs in western Montana, and we're all kind of related that way. So,
yeah,
when they was so young back in them days, you think about it, how they just ventured out, no fear.
Well,
And I mean, not like a train or a bus. It was making your way there.
but it's
And
not like they had a choice either. It was
yeah,
survival.
but of course, horses were a way of getting around.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of how, you know, the rodeo when it was in its earlier days, when those guys were going, the 20s, 30s, and 40s, stuff like that. It was pretty new.
Yeah.
Madison Square Garden was huge, and them gals ride kind of some pretty old bronky horses. It wasn't kind of like, we kind of went in a round pen with a lot of them like we do now. Just soon try to keep them from bucking. There probably wasn't a way to do it then. They kind of had to figure it out, and they didn't have the time, They were good hands, and I think that's kind of how they took the advantage of, maybe rodeoing and were good hands.
Yeah.
And we're good at it. And Uncle Turk, it kind of says in that movie, you might remember, he says, gosh, I was making only so much on a ranch in a month. And he says, I went to a rodeo and I won more than I did in a month's wages. So that's where he really ended up liking rodeo business. And then, of course, Grandpa, ranching was probably one of his main ideas. And Dad, loved the ranch. I mean, rode broncs good and bulldogged and in high school, had, they have cutting, in high school rodeo. And I mean, he did all that, worked both ends of the arena, and basically his true love was basically at the ranch, I mean, there's so many good hands out there, as you see them as you go from circuit to circuit that, man, they could go down the road, probably make some money.
Yep.
But they love the rodeo business, and that's just enough. And then but the ranch is where they're at.
Yeah. And that's what they want to do in rodeo.
That's what they want to do.
Everybody always wants to talk about success in rodeo. Well, that's up to everybody's own perspective, right?
Exactly.
So, I had a horrible rodeo career, but I had a little list of horses that I wanted to get on, and by God, I got to get on all of them. And once that was over, I mean, yeah, I would have liked to have gone to the national finals, but boy, it wasn't worth it. So I feel like my career, which would have been viewed by anybody else in rodeo, was terrible. But my career was great from my perspective. I got to do what I wanted to do. And so everybody puts all of their stake in the NFR and world titles, right? And it doesn't matter because there's some people that don't need that. And it's Jake Costello. I mean, that's the first name that comes to mind. There's just so many guys out there that are exactly what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Could have been world class, but did everything they wanted to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think about that a lot too. We did sell our ranch when I was quite young. I guess it finally sold by the time I was in the second grade.
Yeah.
And so through first and second grade, I went to school in Cody, and Dad was working for the Two Dot Ranch then.
Oh yeah.
Dick Curtis.
Yep.
And of course, they had the bucking horses, and Dad picked up and rode broncs and bulldog there, in between.
Absolutely.
And that's what he did, so he kind of kept his hand in the rodeo business, but was, breaking a lot of colts for Dick, and the Curtis family on the Two Dot Ranch there. So that's kind of where it ended up. So, yeah, so our ranch was sold by the time I was, done with second grade. And from there, we ended up in Roundup. And I was there for third and fourth grade, and Dad worked for the Chimney Butte Ranch there. And then after that, we ended up coming back to Fromberg, or ended up in Fromberg because Grandpa Bill was with the cattle company called Oppenheimer Industries. And they were based out of Kansas City, Missouri. And what they were at that time, Oppenheimer Industries had other entities and whatnot, but what it was an investment for people that had a lot of money and wanted to kind of not have to pay so much taxes. So they developed a cattle company where, saying investors like doctors or lawyers,
It was a
they'd never see them. They wouldn't even worry about it. And ranching was kind of tough in the parts back then, in the 70s. And so they would invest in these cattle, and they were placed on these ranches around where a lot of those ranchers had to sell their cattle just to kind of make the payments. And this gave them an opportunity to basically, run cattle on shares for Oppenheimer Industry.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of book work. There was a lot of brands, there was hip numbers on the heifers.
Oh, yeah.
Say J81 would be one of them.
Yeah.
And that would belong to Dr. Jones or whatever. So
Yeah.
everything was on the computer. I think it was probably on the left shoulder. They had just Oppenheimer Industries, which would be an O. And at the bottom of it, there was just a bar that went kind of through it, and they called it the Gun Sight brand.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it'd be like a peep sight kind of deal. So that's pretty much what Dad and Grandpa did for a while. And then they changed the capital gains tax, and that pretty much shut them down. People couldn't write things off anymore.
Yeah.
But fortunately, it gave a lot of ranchers a chance to get back on their feet.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, Toby Hawks, his dad, Howard, was one of the Oppenheimer crew, and Rainbow
Really?
Hillman, you probably know Rainbow. And yeah, when it come to the busy times, man, all them boys would get together and they'd go, and they were all good hands.
Yeah.
And help these ranchers and do all they'd do the book work, and
Yeah.
it was one heck of a deal. And Toby and Justin Hawks, they were with those deals a lot. And I got to go to some of those events, and oh gosh, great memories.
Yeah.
And then kind of after that shut down, Dad had enough money. We kind of bought that little place out of Fromberg just over the hill from you.
Mm-hmm.
And, we went back to shoeing pretty much full time and riding colts.
Yeah.
And he's still doing that today at 87 years old. But yeah. And so I guess, but yeah, so I kind of often wonder, where I probably would have been.
Yeah.
Today, or where I'd have been, or perhaps I might have been just like Uncle Turk, and ranching wasn't something I was going to go back to. And
Yeah.
but I don't know. But I think about it a lot because, but it kind of is what it is.
Yeah.
But, so it did lead me to shoeing, when I got done. I think that, when a guy does quit rodeoing,
Mm-hmm.
Son of a gun, I tell you what, if you was kind of a little bit low on money, shoot, you might hit a pretty good lick. And of course, gee whiz, we're talking, in the, late 80s, and 90s, when I was going, where shoot, if you won $3,000 that weekend, that kind of heal you up.
Yeah.
And I always kind of figured at that time, I always needed $3,000 in my account in case maybe I got hurt and I had to take a week or two off. That would kind of get me by.
Yeah.
And $3,000 don't get you very far anymore.
No.
And things are following suit. It costs more. The money's up.
Yeah.
So I don't know what a guy'd have to figure he'd have to have in his account nowadays. But so when it really did kind of come to that, and things were done, and got to ride a couple colts and whatnot, and one for you, the old Pete and Repeat.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I got to ride him.
Yeah.
And
Pete,
and some others from other people and whatnot, but that money don't come as fast, riding colts. And I was in Luther and really didn't have a setup, but it was okay.
Yeah.
But you don't realize when you quit how fast money actually goes just on kind of a normal kind of wage, or whatever, just working and finding stuff here and there to do.
Mm-hmm.
And ended up going into some construction, because I kind of done a little bit of framing, not enough to build my own. I could build it, but it'd be like that camper I built. That's on Buckby Stout. And then, but those jobs would always end.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about that was putting some cabinets in junior high school in Big Sky. Not up above, at the resorts and stuff, but down below along the road there.
Yeah.
And son of a gun, the guy I was working for, I don't know what happened, but, my checks were no good, my paychecks, and the gas card was no good. And another guy and I were kind of staying with some other carpenters that were actually working up there in the fancy part of Big Sky. And they said, hey, that rent check you wrote me bounced. What? No kidding? Oh, shoot. Well, I got enough money in my account. So I paid, the rent out of my own money. And I mean, that left me with pennies.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, I don't know what I'm going to do. And gas card was no good. I was finding out, and various stuff. And that guy says, well, you said something about you shoe horses or whatever. And this is in Big Sky, middle of the winter.
Yeah.
And I said, well, yeah. And he says, well, there's a guy down here, and he's been looking for somebody to pull shoes, trim his horses up. He says he hadn't been wanting to do it forever, but nobody shows up to do it. And I said, well, shoot, I could do that. So I went down there and kind of at that time I was just, pull shoes and trim, $25 a head. So I went down there and man, and Quinn and Turk happened to be with me. Kim, we were split up at the time, well, divorced at the time. So she dropped them off and I said, man, you don't understand, Kim. I said, my checking account is drained. I said, my paychecks have been no good. They bounced. I said, this is bad. I said, I don't know what to do. Well, I'll figure it out, she said. Well, okay. So that's how the boys ended up with me. And we went down and met this guy.
Worked out perfect.
And it worked out perfect. Shoot. And there's a great big horse, shoot, almost bucking horse built, And Quinn, man, I like him. He says, I said, well, go catch him first. I said, we'll do him first. So we went, caught him, pulled the shoes and trimmed him up and just had that halter on. Quinn, he wasn't very old. Shoot, he just went over to the fence. Next thing you know, he had that horse pulled up right beside the fence so he could get on him.
Yeah.
Loping through that snow and that corral and them big old feather feet. Man, it's the prettiest thing you ever seen. Got done. Son of a buck. All right, well, 4 head, then 25 piece, $100. He handed me $200 cash.
Yeah.
I looked at the boys. I said, son of a buck, we're going to eat good tonight, and we're going to fill up the truck, and we're headed home. I'm dropping the trailer off at this guy's shop because I'm not coming back to work for him until he gets his finances straightened out. Can't do this.
Yeah.
So after kind of several things like that, not exactly like that, but, jobs here and there, they always end. And just kind of kept falling back on some shoeing. And I thought, you know what? I probably better figure this shoeing business out a little bit. And it was tough. I still had those memories of just being dog tired and whatever, but I just finally decided, you know what? This isn't too bad. And right now I like it more than I did back when I was trying to rodeo, of course. And I enjoy it more, so, and there's a lot to it, but you're learning every day. No different. No different than rodeo. You keep learning. I mean, shoot, you're going to struggle at times as you're learning, but you do what you got to do.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, son of a gun, here about a little over 3 weeks ago, Thursday, we kind of had a pretty good warm up here in Montana, and it kind of had been, but we had some snow and it got icy, and shoot, stopped by the house there and had some lunch. And then I was kind of on the east end of Billings, and then stopped at the house, had some lunch, and I was going to go to Park City. And I just had one to shoe and one to trim after lunch. That was it. Shoot, this is perfect. And I walked outside and I'm kind of looking around, and Quinn's little wiener dog, Rusty, he took off heading for a rabbit, and I'm kind of laughing at him. And I got my snow shovel in my hand because I'm trying to get rid of some of this because I know it's getting icy. Man, and I knew this ice was there, and I stepped on it, had just enough water in it. My feet went out from under me, and I mean, first thing to hit was my right shoulder and my head. Didn't hurt my head one bit, but I sure messed up that rotary cuff stuff in there. I don't know. So I'm just kind of getting back to shoeing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I didn't have $3,000 in my bank account for this deal. So I thought, you know what, by golly, you tore your bicep when you was rodeoing, you better look at this shoeing business the same dadgum way and get this shoulder healed up and do things right.
Yeah.
So that's what I've been doing.
Well, you got experience with it anyway.
What's that?
You got experience with injuries anyway.
Well, yeah, I guess you don't look at them that much. I was always lucky. That bicep tear ended up being the long head from the shoulder. I didn't have to go through surgery for that. And fortunately, I've never broke a bone, so I don't have any idea what that's about.
Till this day?
Well, I don't think it's broke. It's working pretty good.
Really?
Yeah, I can do this now. But no, there's certain moves, and you've been under enough horses trimming or shoeing, you got that front foot between your legs and they'll just kind of jerk it from you and you just reach back and grab it real quick,
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was on the right front and horse just pulled a foot through there and I reached back to grab that son of a gun and it bit.
And you just kept pulling.
I looked like a coyote. My mouth just turned into a little O and I kind of howled for a little bit. Quinn's looking at me. He says, "You all right?" I said, "Well, I found one move I can't do yet."
So you never broke a bone? Ever? How?
I don't know. Well, probably like this shoulder injury. If I did land, I probably landed on my head. I don't know.
Benefit to be hard-headed.
Yeah, I was lucky there.
Huh.
I think the worst thing is ligaments, stuff like that.
Yeah.
My knees ain't very good and
Yeah.
whatnot. But And that's another sad thing about it. Shoot, when you're shooting, you're kind of you're bent over and funny kind of deal, really holding a foot properly, especially a foot, you got more strength when you actually turn your toes in a little bit and get your knees in there, you know, and for some reason that don't bother them too much.
Yeah.
But when I stand up, then I'm getting a little more bowlegged all the time.
Well, maybe the first portion of your life, which if anybody's seen pictures of you, your toes were not turned in,
No.
has counter-reacted.
Yeah, that is a funny deal, because I remember Dad telling me that when he was teaching me. He says, well, just turn your toes in a little bit. When all his life, Dad always said, just try.
Yeah.
That's all. He never said much. You've been around him enough. He don't speak much.
Yeah.
And whenever I'd leave, go somewhere, my mom always told me, turn your toes out.
That's pretty cool.
And it is pretty cool too, because, in Miles City, that old, gosh, who used to make all the stirrup leathers way back then? Man, you were just young then.
Gosh, I don't even know.
Man, what was his name? Man, I apologize for this. But you walk in there and there's all them bronc riding pictures of those guys,
Yeah.
And I mean, man, that's pretty. I mean, you look at something, that horse is stretched out, kicking over his head, them front feet are 2 feet in the air, and I mean, they're buried in the neck, and them toes are cranked.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what is in your mind, and that's what you want to do. Heck yeah. And your dad said, you know what? If you roll your knees out a little bit, you'll get your toes out further there, Stubby.
Classic.
So classic.
Supportive Ike Sankey right there.
Yeah.
So what about your high school? I mean, you high school rodeoed and then you went to college in Powell, and I know that.
Yep.
But what about that dynamic and that climate down there with those guys? Because that was a pretty salty set of guys at the time.
I'm kind of glad you brought this up, I guess, because, in high school, it was kind of funny. I was more like a puppy when it come to finally getting rodeoing, because we were in Fromberg at the time, and we'll go back a little bit further than that, and Little Britches Rodeo was around, and man, I wanted to go to a Little Britches Rodeo, man. That just sounded like the deal, and Dad says, oh, you just need to get a little stronger yet and develop a little bit more. So finally, in between my 5th and 6th grade year, Dad says, well, we'll probably let you enter that Billings Rodeo. I'm going to be judging, so just as well let you enter it, since we're going to be there anyway.
Yeah, you're not going to win anything, but you can get on.
Yeah, well, he didn't say that, really. And we'll get to that here, because it's in the story. So then, all right, so shoot, he's out in the shop there. Shoot, by the end of the day, that was just things he was doing kind of later on. And shoot, one day he'd come in there and he says, all right, here you go. And he braided me my steer rope. Braided it. Yeah. He's talented in that, leather and everything. So he set me down on the footstool. He says, all right. He says, I'm going to teach you how to pull your rope,
Mm-hmm.
He says, all right, slide back. Lay your forearm flat on their back. Put your hand in there. Well, he showed me how to warm it up a little bit, just on a footstool. And he said, I'm going to pretend we're going to pull it up. When you like it, you just lay it across your hand, bring it around your wrist, and then back across your hand again. And he says, and even sometimes you can do a little, lay it between your little finger. Well, we got kind of fatter hands, so that was too much in my hand. So I laid it between my little finger, the old finger tuck, and that felt pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, all right. He says, now slide right up there on your hand and get your chest out and nod your face. And I said, oh, okay. He says, you got it? And I said, yeah. I said, yeah. But if I forget anything, you'll be there. Hell no, he says, I won't be. He says, I'll be judging. So anyway, we get there, get the rodeo, had an old Ford station wagon, back in the day. We get there, and man, of course, there I am. I've got these, well, there were shotgun chaps, but they zippered from the top down. So that worked out pretty good. I'd just take them from the top and I'd zipper them down right to my knee, and that way I kind of had batwing shafts.
Oh, yeah.
My
little flare.
My dad, the bow rope, that Dad had made me and everything. And boy, I'm sitting there at the car, and I got this, not even really a gear bag, just kind of an old cloth duffel bag looking thing. Wasn't nothing fancy. And had my great Aunt Alice's spurs, bronc riding spurs. Had the Shap guard on them and everything. just 5-star rowel in them. The rowels weren't locked, or nothing like that.
But they've been there and done that.
You'd been there and done that. And so I'm kind of going through all my stuff. Man, am I excited. And of course, at that time, Dad went over to the office to get all of his paperwork. Pretty soon he'd come back, and Mom was standing at the front of the car, and I was back by the back bumper, just all excited. And pretty soon I seen Mom just kind of look, and she had the saddest look on her face. And I'm like, what the heck? Oh, I wonder what's up. Deb, come here, Dad says. And I said, what's going on? And he says, well, all the parents see that I'm judging, you're entering, and they don't want you to be able to compete because I'm pretty sure I'm going to give you favoritism. So they voted that you cannot ride here today. Oh, boy, I tell you what, just jerked a rug out from underneath a kid,
Yeah.
And Dad looks at Mom and says, Jesus Christ. He says, I wouldn't show favoritism to nobody. I'd just judge it the way it is. Besides that, he probably wouldn't ride his first one anyway. And then, geez, talk about adding salt to the wound. I'm like, what?
I'll show you.
What in the world? Well, all right. So that was over. But he said, well, by golly, I tell you what. He says, you can enter it next year and I won't be judging. So,
Yeah.
And then, so that's kind of how that started. So I was pretty dang excited. The next year, the Billings Little Britches Rodeo got there, went behind the chutes and shoot out back there. That's where I met Clint Bronger for the first time.
Really?
Oh, don't look any different then than he does now. Exactly the same. I'm
Did
not
he have
kidding
glasses?
you. Huh?
Glasses?
No.
No glasses.
No, Clint?
Only difference.
No glasses. Oh, yeah, he does wear them now.
Yeah.
I guess every so often he does. No, same face, same grin.
Same size.
Same everything, same size. Big old buckle on him already.
Are you guys the same age?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he comes up. You need some help? You know how his voice. I said, heck yeah, I'll pull your rope for you. So we got up there and I got on this steer and pulled the rope and steer went out. Might have had to flank on that little steer too much or something. Just fell over right there.
Yeah.
Re-ride. Clint, proud of you. Do just like that on your re-ride. Proud of you. So next one rolls in when I finally get my re-ride and he pulls my rope again for me and steer just kind of lopes out through there like it does. I forgot to breathe or something. I think I kind of run out of air and next thing you know, I fell off. Not very far. Yeah, I just basically fell off. Then I'm like, shoot. Dad did say I wasn't going to ride my first one. Well, wait a minute. The first one I rode to the ground.
Yeah.
Didn't I? But so that's kind of how that started. So then in high school, I was always so excited. Didn't get to go to a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
That's just kind of the way it was just Mom and Dad just kind of held me back. I guess wanted to build that desire.
Yeah.
And when it got to college, then the first year, your dad, Ike, wasn't there. And was just riding all three events and still just kind of going at it like I did, just happy to be there. And sometimes things would go pretty good, sometimes not, but no big deal. Ever since that day when they told me I couldn't get on one when I was a kid, that stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
And then your dad started, coaching then.
Yeah.
And Marvin Garrett came to school that year.
Yeah.
And so Marvin was probably the most professional attitude with, the gas and the flair. It's like you just didn't see people ride bareback horses like him at that age.
Yeah.
There was a few, but Tracy Mikes rode really good. But they're just, and then Kevin Kessler, and he rode really good, but there was just, everything else was, pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Probably for a college age.
At that level.
At kind of at that level.
Yeah.
And I'm not afraid to say it. I learned so much from Ike, at that time, just on various different things. And finally, I just, was riding actually pretty dang good. And Dick and the Gifford Ranch down there, they'd always buck out some young horses. A lot of them were Mustang type horses, By the time you got out of the chute, both of you was wringing wet with sweat. But I'd go over there. I worked for Litton's Big R, and he'd let me off every other Wednesday. And so I could go over there and get on some horses. Yeah. And I'd just head over there by myself and all the things that I kind of learned and things were going pretty good. And shoot, kind of that summer after college was out, early in the summer, the Cody Knightley was going on. And I went down there because, man, I was just getting blowed out the back. So got down there and went to the Cody Night Rodeo and entered in this old rigging that I had. I mean, at the college level, there was no point in the back. The handle was all peeling apart. It'd been soaked in water and shortened up, for the one guy I bought it from in high school.
Yeah.
And it was too tight. So whatever point was in the back, Dad, he just took a rasp and filed it out of there. Ike says, man, you got to find a different rig. So I ended up finding a different one. And then he kind of showed me how to kind of set it up. And so there you go. You learn something new all the time.
Yeah.
But no, actually, he made me get rid of that rigging in college. Oh my God, where'd you get this?
Yeah.
But I still didn't know that things changed after a while, So there you go. You just keep learning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's awesome that like you and Marvin went to school together.
Yeah.
That's how long was he there?
He was there just a semester.
Yeah.
Just wasn't for Marvin.
Yeah.
Yep. He liked it. And I mean, but yeah, I don't know. I think it just wasn't for Marvin.
Yeah. No.
And so he took off and away he went.
Yeah.
Away he went.
Yeah.
But it was really fun, just to be around him that short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And,
had an impact.
And, well, you had some things that, Ike, your dad, was trying to teach me that I could actually visualize by somebody that knew kind of how to handle that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what about the riding styles? Like, I know enough about Marvin and Larry and Mark that Mark's was different, I guess, but like everything for Marvin was up, knees up, everything free arm up, just bareback riding, which that's kind of how I see it is like there's you, Clint Corey style, then there's like Marvin, Larry style,
right?
I think goes back to Bruce. But where did you decide to be a knees apart guy instead of a knees up guy?
I don't know. It just kind of comes when you're riding. And I think, and people ask, because I've had the opportunity to do some clinics and work with some kids. So I said, look, you're going to develop your own style.
Yeah.
After a while, your style's in you, and just through times, it all kind of comes together. It takes a while.
Yeah.
It takes a whole time. You never quit learning.
Mm-hmm.
You never quit learning, and I think free arm ways. I think I remember listening to your dad that listened to everything, and he was talking about somebody in there had their free arm or whatever where they were at, and in the chute, and I says, get up there. He said, just lay your free arm right on the chute, and he says that's where that needs to be. It don't need to go anywhere else. It'll take care of itself. And I started thinking about that, and just walking like on a corral fence,
Yeah.
just kind of walking along. And if you're kind of moving around, if you really need something and you're losing your balance, I mean, your arms will kind of take care of themselves.
Yeah.
So you just end up having it where it's natural. And then it'll take care of itself when you need to.
Mm-hmm.
And there's times later on when, when a guy's riding good and things are just rolling, I mean, there might be a time where you might just move it in a certain direction or whatever, just because you can, because your mind is working so quick.
Yeah.
And that's what's cool. That's the cool feeling you wish for everybody to feel when things are just automatic and they just kind of keep rolling. As far as, just getting your knees apart and whatnot, I mean, that just made so much sense to me that, yeah, when he does that. And then Larry Peabody actually really helped me out one time.
Oh.
And I was talking to him, and we was in Miles City, and we just happened to be coming through Miles City, stopped at the old 600 there to have a really good breakfast because, man, as a rodeo cowboy, you know where to get good food.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was Jay Kirkland and I, and we stopped in there, and Larry Peabody happened to be in there. And he's, well, hey, how's everything going? Good. And I said, well, shoot. I said, man, Larry, for some reason, right out of there, I'm kind of taking a snatching. And he says, lift with your feet. I said, what? He just said, lift with your feet. He's like, Dad, he's kind of a man of few words. So I got thinking about that, through football practice and whatnot. You did them leg lifts. So then I started going home, laying on the floor, getting my toes turned out and doing leg lifts and lifting
Yeah.
with my feet. Man, reach up there and set your feet. Got a hold of one and you lift with your feet. Everybody lift on your rigging. That's kind of a hard thing to understand. Lifting on a rigging, it's not like lifting weights.
Yeah.
But also, you want your hips under you. But then all of a sudden, as soon as Larry told me about lifting with my feet, man, you're starting to lift with your rigging, walk up there. And Larry never really sat on one in there. He always kind of called for one above. So I started, perfecting that.
Yeah.
And I really
remember
like that.
Yeah.
And just sliding up there, you're lifting on your rigging, you're curling your hips to your rigging, and you nod. And boom, as soon as you hit your rigging, horse turns out of there and you mash with your feet and you lift with your feet. All three of them come together.
Yeah.
The only thing you don't lift with is your chin. Keep that baby down.
Yeah, but as long as you're having the constant pressure against everything going the same direction and it pulls you underneath your rigging,
Yeah.
that's the goal.
And then, and just besides that, lifting with your feet, horses coming up and jumping away from you. And when you're younger and a kid, all of them good things, just drag to your rigging. Well, a lot of times they ain't going to make it to the handhold.
Yeah, aim for your
They're
rigging.
going to come down low.
You'll hit the flank.
But I mean, if you start lifting with your feet,
Yeah.
I mean, some of them you can start getting picked up.
Yeah.
And shortened up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's some out there you better just handle your business because if you don't, they're going to handle you pretty good, know. But yeah, some of them, man, you can, holy cow, actually pick them up. It's cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's fun.
Yeah.
Woo.
So, do you think if your folks wouldn't have sold that place, do you think your trajectory would have been different? Do you think you'd have ever rodeoed?
No, I think I would have.
Yeah.
I do because, when we had that ranch out there on Sage Creek, Bill Smith, J.C. Bonine, they were all good friends of Dad's. And, Dan Monroe and, Bud's dad. And, you got to see some of them guys every so often.
Yeah.
And of course, when we was on that 2 Dot Ranch in Cody and, gosh, and you watch that and you'd watch Dad. Oh, typical kid, first, second grader. You're not going to sit in the bleachers all day. You got too dadgum much energy.
Yeah.
So down below the bleachers you'd go, and next thing you know, you're building roads with old pop cans and stuff. But boy, you hear the bronc riding come, man. Out there to the fence you went, watch Dad.
Yeah.
And my cousins, the Teals, over there on Blue Water, Uncle Bob rode broncs too, so sometimes it'd be a family trip. They'd come down, we'd meet up, and we'd go there. And whatnot. So yeah, watch the bronc riding and shoot. Mark and Bruce and I, we was always playing rodeo.
Yeah.
You just did. You just played rodeo. Shoot, we just roll old tires and then jump on them, pretend to be a bareback rider, spur that tire out and fall over backwards. And you'd only get one spur lick in because out the back door you'd go, but it was harmless.
Yeah.
Put the old rag handle riggings, on a horse and jump irrigation ditches with them and stuff. And yeah, shoot, and even, probably get some cattle in. You probably shouldn't get in trouble for getting on them. And, but of course they were our dads. So,
and that's what
they kind of had to be firm a little bit with that. But
that's what happens when you got ranch kids,
that's
right?
what happens.
So, I don't know if there's any legitimacy to this story, but we heard when we bought this place, as soon as you pull in the driveway here, just this side of the archway, there was a set of corrals there, and it was just basically a round pen, and they were old, and we bought this place in 2000. And going way back into our conversation about Turk and Alice, what we were told is that they used to gather horses over there on Pryor and on the reservation, and then drive them over here, just random horses, and then they'd snub them up there, and they'd get on them, and they'd buck them all, and then the ones that bucked, they'd take over there to the rodeo and Red Lodge. Think there's any truth to that?
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
I was, stopped at Dad's place on the way. I was shoeing over in the Fromberg area, so stopped and seen Dad and Francie. That'd be something I'm going to have to ask him.
I'd like
But
to
it
hear
wouldn't
that.
surprise me because I know, Pack Saddle Ben
Yeah.
used to trade a lot of horses.
Yeah.
And great grandma Myrtle scared to death because traded with the Indians a lot.
Yeah.
But I mean, those are different times. It's not that they were savage. I'm not saying that, just so we don't get in trouble or anything like that. But I mean, they were doing some trading.
Yeah.
So you're kind of looking at
Trading.
a person that's probably isn't really speaking English, and they're kind of talking, and their eyes are focused on each other, and they trade horses. So he traded a lot of horses that way.
Yeah.
So, that's interesting. Got to find that out.
Yeah, that'd be a great story to find out.
Yeah, but
If
it
we
wouldn't
could
surprise me a
justify it.
bit because, it's just like we said, when, Pack Saddle Bend headed west,
Yeah.
there wasn't any trailers or buses or anything like that. It was making your way.
Ranchy.
So it'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be darned.
All right, real quick, we got to pay some bills. Got to say thank you to the Bozeman Stampede, Bozeman, Montana, August 7th, 8th, and 9th. You can go to their website to get tickets at bozemanstampede.com. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you I'm going to put the link somewhere, but I'll have somebody do it. So, bozemanstampede.com. Tickets go on sale June 1st.
Well, we had to take a break, which is natural. Every so often got to head out there and see if that sun's still shining or whatever, and it sure is. But yeah, I tried to get back to where, and I guess during the break I had a chance to think, what if they would have had the ranch? I mean, it's hard to tell where I'd be.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I would like to have more of the knowledge of just, being on a ranch. I mean, shoot, the calving, I've rarely done hardly any of that at all.
What's wrong with
And
that?
I mean, well, I know it, but you want to be part of the story, I mean, even if it's for a night, but I guess a couple of times I did go out where somebody was calving and we checked on a lot of things, but by morning, I think we had a steer in there. It was just a night of drinking, but still it was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. But being able to hold on to something too, as far as the property and the land and whatnot.
Yeah.
I admire people and things that have been in their family for generations and they're able to hold on to it. That's not that easy.
Yeah, especially now.
And it's about any time, and it's never going to be easy.
Yeah.
So, I admire that. And where would I be now? I don't know, but I know where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
I heard an old timer say one time, he said, "How you doing?" "Well, I'm just making her day to day." "Oh, really?" "Yeah, the way it's looking," he says, "I'll probably have to work half a day of my own funeral." Well, yeah, I might be in the same boat, but if I am, shoot, if you're working a half a day of your own funeral, at least you'll go to bed early before, everybody gets to drink and celebrating your life, and you'll wake up in heaven, hopefully, and you won't even have a hangover.
Well, you're going to get a half a day off.
Yeah, you're going to have half a day off anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a first class flight on up to meet the good Lord. I don't know.
It's all a matter of perspective.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Did you vote?
Yes, I did. Legally.
I figured that'd be something you'd want to visit about.
Man, oh my gosh, yeah. Well, here we are. And I like him. I like President Trump, and I kind of always have. And the reason I like him is just because he reminds me of just the men we grew up around.
Mm-hmm.
He's a man.
Yeah.
And he's done a lot of things in his life. I mean, he's got, some military school background, whatever. He kind of got sent there, according to something that I'd run across, because he was kind of being a little bit outlawish, and his dad put him in there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you're going to line yourself out. So he understands that. What I respect about him is he knows more about life and what everybody else goes through in this country than what they might think.
Yeah.
I mean, here's a guy that's a multi-billionaire, and he's talking about the ridiculousness of low flush toilets and low water usage dishwashers.
Yeah.
You got to run the dishwasher 2 or 3 times. You got to flush the toilet 2 or 3 times. What's the use of saving money? I mean, what other kind of a billionaire knows that, I mean, that's how observant he is.
Well, how it seems to me is like everything that we talk about on a day-to-day basis is the stuff that he's getting done.
He's getting her done.
Yeah.
And he understands agriculture.
Yeah.
He understands you need water for this. And man, I just like the way he thinks. I mean, he's funny. He'll stir the pot and then let people stew over it. But that guy never quits working.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah.
I mean, shoot, he hasn't quit working since he was president.
Yeah.
Before.
Exactly.
He never quit over the last 4 years.
Yep.
And I mean, as soon as he was elected, he was already handling business.
He already had things done.
And already getting things done. And why in the world people cannot see that?
Yeah.
You're not going to get a handout. You're just not. And I think a lot of people are going to lose that.
Yep.
I'm afraid. I'm glad he's looking into things. I think Doge is a good deal. No matter how much they want to complain there. I mean, they're dealing with the Department of Agriculture. Though I haven't had my hand in the cattle business and the agriculture business for, most of my life. Really, when I was younger, I was too young to understand what was involved in that. But you talk to any farmer or rancher, there are deals that just don't suit the whole business as a whole. There's people that are not even on the farm, but it's a big corporate farm, and there's people who wouldn't even know how to start a tractor that are still getting checks,
Yeah.
So that there's stuff like that. And they're smart. So I'm glad to see they're looking into those deals. And I think, there's going to be some decisions made. There's going to be some cuts. Dang sure loved it when he said there are two genders. Well, you're in the buck and horse business. We got people in the agriculture business. We got people that are farmers. You can't put two male plants together.
Yeah.
There's several of them little greenhouses along the way in this country anymore. They only use the female plant, but there you go, or whatever. I don't know.
I got 11 studs over here in one pasture.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about reproduction.
No. Boy, they're happy out there in the old sunshine. They're pretty relaxed.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're running around with 5 legs right now. Bleep, bleep.
Too late.
Well,
how about the Yankees?
Their tail. I'm talking about their tail. Jeez, get your mind out of the gutter.
Well, I guess we better talk about rodeo a little bit, huh?
Sure.
What's it like winning a world title?
There's a good story. And it has to, well, we'll just kind of go on with it. It's so when it kind of happened, and the neat thing about it is the 10th round. And
so it was
not
kind of a game 7, like it came down to it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it did. It could kind of go either way, in a lot of ways, but basically, the shot was mine.
Yeah. Who else was in play? Oh,
good Lord. I can't even remember who well, let's see. Marvin.
Yeah.
Was one of them, and Clint Corey was the other, kind of at that time. And Marvin actually showed up to the finals not feeling very good.
Oh.
So there you go. You learn a lot. Okay. So what if Marvin was completely healthy? I don't know.
Yeah.
What would have happened? But so it was kind of coming down to 10th round, and Louis Field was standing there, behind the chutes. He was in the bronc riding that year, and that guy cracked me up. Man, what a good guy. And looked around, and he says, well, what do you think? I said, boy, I don't know, Louis. I said, man, I got a shot. And I said, but I kind of got jitters like I've never had. All I got to do is spur him out and go on. That's just kind of the champion that he was, And I thought, and everything just left me.
Yeah.
All the tenseness, it really did. And then it ended up happening, and you don't know, but pretty soon they're grabbing you. Come on. What? Well, yeah, you did it. Really. So from there, you're nothing but with media, and back into Thomas and Mack, and you're back in there, and they got their newsroom and everything. And all you can think about is, man, I want to go back and see my buddies there in the locker room. I want to go see my buddies. Well, you don't really get to see them till the rodeo's darn near over.
Yeah.
So after everything was over, of course, you're loading everything up. It's the 10th round. You're
Yeah.
hauling your gear bag out. Gosh, yeah, you never had to pack your gear bag once, but twice. Pack it in and pack it out. That was it. Got to leave it in that nice warm locker room.
For
Justin
10
Sports
days.
Medicine at the Thin Farm was great, man. You got treated like a king. I'm not kidding you. Holy cow. So anyway, we get back to the hotel. Kim, my wife at the time, she was tired, and she says, well, we were downtown, Gold Nugget or something like that downtown. And she was tired, and I said, well, shoot, I haven't got to see any of my friends. I said, I know there's a couple of them over there at Binion's. I said, oh, you mind if I just go over there and visit? Yeah, go ahead. Because the banquet and everything's over by then,
Mm-hmm.
And we get down in there, and I got her all put away and clothes packed up, and she hit the hay, and I headed down to the Binion's. Walked in there, and there's Ken Linsgraff and Chuck Logue and shoot about 3 or 4 other guys, and they was all kind of standing at the bar. And I come walking in there, and Chuck Logue goes, Deb, buy me a beer. I said, shoot, Chuck. I said, I just won the world. I thought you guys might buy me a beer. Hell no, he says. He says, I want you to buy me a beer while you're still a world champion, because in 5 minutes it's going to be midnight, and you'll be an ex-world champion. And I thought, you know what? You're right. At midnight, it's over. I mean, the new season's already begun anyway. So at midnight, it's over. So that was kind of some of the coolest advice ever that, a guy is going to learn, especially from somebody like Chuck Logue,
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it is it's really cool. And I think more than anything, I think it's kind of because ever since you was a kid, and you actually seen your first gold buckle,
Mm-hmm.
gosh, you wanted to win one.
Yeah.
And, and I love the rodeo life, so it didn't, that was just part of it.
Yeah.
And you kind of won other things along the way, but like Chuck says, at midnight, you're an ex-world champion. And so that puts a lot of things into perspective there. But looking at them buckles, story about Bruce Ford. We were coming from Ellensburg going to Dillon. And Bruce, boy, he was a master at, just charming the heck off of a person. I was younger then, and just probably only about my second year of going hard. Old Bruce, he gets in. I got this 1977 Chrysler New Yorker. We're headed out from Ellensburg, and man, he just talks for a little while, reclines the seat, and goes to sleep. So I'm driving, and I'm tired. Well, there's enough sunlight that as he was reclined in there, the reflection of his gold buckle filled probably 2/3 of the windshield. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And I drove, and I just sat there until the sun rays, it disappeared. But here was this gold buckle right there in my windshield. And I tell you what, I drove all the way.
Yeah.
So you look at them, and you notice those things, and you just study them. You know exactly what they look like. And then when I seen the back of one and realized they did some tooling on the back of them, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I was like, holy cow, they put some work into these babies. So, it's a part.
Yeah. I'm so glad they've never changed those buckles.
Oh, no. Yeah. And yeah, they don't need to, because, the Heisman Trophy still has a leather helmet.
Yeah.
And they're still the same. And fact, shoot, one time, it was after I'd won the world, and Chris Ledoux was going to be playing in Billings, and I'd called home, and Kim says, you'll never believe who just called. And I said, who? She said, Chris Ledoux. She says, I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it was him, but he's putting on a concert, of course, with Lynn and Larry Sandvik, down there in KC. They're good friends, and Quinn always used to sing, and he traveled with me all over ever since he was just little till he started school. But he used to sing, Bareback Jack, but he always thought it was called I'm Glad. Instead, because in the song, when I was just a very young lad, Quinn always thought he just said I'm glad.
Yeah.
So he loved that song. Well, Chris Ledoux found out about that, and he told Kim, he says, I've got front row tickets for you and Quinn and Deb. I'm at the concert. Just pick them up at will call. And so was able to be home. They were in California, and as everything come, was able to be home when he was in concert there in Billings. We got back there and got behind there and had backstage passes, and we went back and seen his bus, and he had them horns on his bus. And Quinn, he's just like, wow, look at this. This is cool. we're talking about it, and Chris and I are just kind of standing there like cowboys do, you know, maybe thumb in the pocket and talking with our hands, or I do, and everybody does. And look down at his buckle. I said, them buckles are pretty nice, aren't they, Chris? And he says, they sure are. I said, but they're sure hard on your knuckles. He says, what do you mean? I said, because you're always tucking your shirt in and you're catching them little ruby beads all the way around. You're scraping your knuckles up all the time. And he laughed. So during the concert, we was out there, and of course, we was in our front row seats and everything. And Chris, he comes out and he's going to sing Bareback Jack. And he looked at Quinn and he says, this is for you, Quinn. And announced that. And Quinn's eyes just lit up because he's about 5 years old. And then later on, he says, well, here's another song I wrote, Gold Buckle Dreams. And he just pulled his guitar away and he went like this and tucked his shirt in and looked right at us. You know? Oh, so that's how that kind of rolls, I guess. Yeah, it's stories of just kind of sitting around after it's over, and you're kind of looking around at gold buckles, you know, don't matter which end of the arena there is, and you're thankful that you was able to be a part of that, you know. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a relief when you win the world? Does it relieve stress? Do you think I did it, or does it really change anything?
No, I don't think it changes anything. What changed probably my riding more than anything was the year before that, in '92 in May in Cloverdale, when I horse hit the fence. It's on YouTube somewhere.
Oh, is this when you hung and drug?
Nice mare, man, hit it with her head down.
Yeah.
And I remember just being up against the fence, and I kind of pushed with my elbow because didn't know where she was going. Her head was plumb down. Well, then when she whirled off the fence with her head down, her wither disappeared. My rigging went over her wither.
Yeah.
And oh my God, we come around that corner and I couldn't get my hand out, you know, because she's circling around to the left and I ride left-handed, and I couldn't get my hand out, and that rigging just kept going. And I thought, oh man, this might be the end of me. Right here under her belly I went. I'm glad it wasn't a Kessler horse. I don't know. There wouldn't be nothing left of me, I don't think. But man, everybody did a great job. I mean, and I got out of there. You know, I got out of there all right. But kind of coming around that corner in Cloverdale, I mean, I can remember coming around the corner, and it just kind of centrifugal force kind of sent me out, and I kind of went under the arena a little bit of the post, caught the post right on my legs. Boom! Snatched me right there, and then I was getting tired by then and trying to get my feet, but you can't because your rig was plumb down. Yeah. And I can remember hearing Bob Tallman in that voice, cover your head, kid, cover your head. You don't hear anything when you're riding. Well, you do as you get older. But anyway, I thought, well, okay, he must see something I can't. So I went like this, and she stepped on me 3 times right there. I said, forget that, man. I'm getting to my feet. About that time, they kind of had her mugged down, and no Bruce Flellen. He was there and pick up shafts. The only thing I could do was grab the back of his shafts and finally get myself pulled his shafts down. I got my hand out, and I was like so happy, and I just looked at him. I'm just grinning like, holy cow. And he just glared at me, boom, and he punches me in the shoulder and got on his horse. That changed my whole deal, you know, because went to St. George the next day, and had some guys with me. I had a van that guys catching rides, so I went to St. George. Well, about halfway through that ride, something hurt. Something wasn't right.
In St. George.
Yeah. And then, boy, pretty soon I couldn't lift very good, and things were going. I got off on the pickup, man, and just kind of reached up and grabbed my arm because it was sore right there, and there was nothing there. I was like, oh, shoot, what did I do? So I might have started it in Cloverdale, but I finished it the next day.
Yeah.
And of course, going back to Montana, that was the last one that I was going to for that weekend. I had a long drive from St. George back to old Roscoe, Montana, or, you know, Luther.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of thinking, you know. It's like, you know, things are going good. I've been to the finals a few times now and really haven't won anything. I was like, I don't want my career to end like this.
Yeah.
And that really changed my mindset. And I really started thinking about things, what do I want to do? Am I going to be okay? Can I come back? If I can come back, I better change my way.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes back the first year I made the finals in 88. And we're driving down there, Colin Murnion and Clint Bronger and I, we're headed down there. And we're just about, we're getting hour and a half from Vegas. And I look over and there's old Clint sitting there, just the way he does, He's writing stuff down. I said, "What are you writing, Clint?" "Oh, just steps, setting my rope and pulling my rope and taking my wrap, just writing down steps in kind of an outline form." I was like, "Really?" It's like, man, this guy's rode tough ever since the first day I met him at that Little Britches rodeo.
Yeah.
And I said, here he is. He's been in the finals. This is his second finals already. And he's writing down notes. Well, I started thinking about that.
What finals was this for you? Your first finals was
it
in
would have
88?
been 88.
And then you win a world in
93.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I started thinking about that, on my drive home after I'd torn my bicep, which would have been in 92.
Yeah.
And so I started writing down some steps and I started really thinking about things. And I started figuring out that getting to the rodeo was step one. Getting behind the chutes and making sure you got everything and whatever, And I just kind of made these series of steps.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of took off, get your seat right out of there. And after that, it's reaction time. You don't know, where they're going to be.
That part's simple.
But I mean, from that minute that you get there to the time you nod your face and that first jump out of the chute, that's where it's going to be.
Yeah.
And, hold your feet and, shoot, lift on your rig and get your hips under you and lift with them feet and hold them for a couple and then build your ride. And then, boy, when you got her opened up, then your mind knows it.
Yeah.
And that's when things kind of started happening. And I barely made the finals that year. I went in 14th in 92, just getting this bicep healed up. But through about, late summer, these steps really started paying off. Went in 14th, and that was the year that I won the average. And things just really started clicking. So like I say, you never quit learning. And then kind of from then on, kind of till I ended up tearing my groin, I knew that was that was something I wasn't going to be able to come back from, but it was getting that point in time. And the last horse I got on was that nice horse you guys had, that kind of blue, gray. Nice horse. Circle right around there. Holy cow.
Kaleidoscope.
No.
Moni.
I will think of it. That's why I got fired from voting for horses, too. I never could remember. Hey, what's this horse like? I think he's a bay. No kidding. Well, yeah.
That was a good guess.
Yeah.
We were talking about the gray horse that you had the last one you got on.
Yeah.
324 Broadway. Probably the best bareback horse we've ever had.
Oh, my gosh. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And that was, that was my last horse I ever got on.
Where was it?
In Billings.
At the Chase Hawks?
No, it'd have been at the Nile, I believe.
Yeah.
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 Yep.
I'm still kind of mad at you over that, by the way.
Oh.
Never told you this, but I remember asking you, I think I was 16 or 17, told you I was rodeoing.
Yeah.
I asked you if I could come rodeo with you, and I think you were with John Sherraw at the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, I remember that. And you wrote a story on that before you even started rodeoing.
I did?
Your mom told me.
I don't remember, but
She wrote something like
I was pretty upset that you quit.
I know.
And why did John Sherraw call you Grumpy Smurf?
I don't know. I'm probably grumpy at times.
Did you know that?
No. I didn't even have a beard, and I don't have blue hair. Or I'm not blue.
Must have just been really grumpy then.
Yeah, well, everybody's got to have a nickname.
It's true. And everybody gets some time to get grumpy. But, okay, so we talked about Broadway. That's horse you were talking about, your last one. And then you said you got kicked off of the stock selection call. What Go ahead. I wasn't going to bring that up, but what's that like from a contestant's perspective?
You know, I think it still goes back to that time when I couldn't get on that first one at the Little Britches Rodeo. From then on, it didn't matter. If I got to get on, I got to get on. I didn't care what it was.
So your vote didn't count because it was no merit.
So come to picking horses, you know, we're sitting there and, San Francisco was always the time when we kind of had the list. We'd go over a lot of them, you know, and just, it was fun. Kelly Wardell was the director at the time.
Yeah.
But, you know, all the contractors would nominate horses and we'd kind of get them whittled down to where, and we'd talk about them. Well, what about this? So now Brookman had 2 horses. One was Aces and Eights and one was Ace of Spades, both black horses. And of course, me not remembering what I had, but of course I was in Wolf Point and well, here we go, telling stories. I was a hungover son of a gun. Wolf Point was a 2-header, and I ended up spending the night in Wolf Point. Get to the Wolf Point Rodeo. I mean, I'm just not feeling very good at all. I don't know what happened, but I did get carried away. So I've got one of these 2 horses. I don't know which one it is, and I'm thinking, this just isn't good. Not at a Brookman Rodeo. They were kind of still raised in a minefield at the time, you know. They were going to go left, right, and maybe long one jump. You never know. Oh, yeah, get on this horse, and I'm just kind of sliding up there, and I just let him have me. That's all I could think of. And out we went, and I held my feet, you know, because all I could think of was, well, like, I'm going to have to just hold my feet. You know, and just kind of let reaction take over after that. Boy, next thing you know, this son of a gun is just making a nice little circle round to the right, and I'm just like having a best time of my life. You know, 8 seconds before that, I was saying, man, I'll never do this to myself again. And 8 seconds after it was over, it was like, man, that wasn't bad at all. So it comes to voting these horses. No, guys, this story, here's the deal, man. I was a mess. I was a wreck. This is the nicest hoppingest son of a gun there is. Put it in the hopper pen, the number 1 pen.
And it was the wrong horse.
It was the wrong horse. Clint Corey gets on the horse the first time, and I mean, I'm watching this thinking, man, this is just right, you know. Man, got a good Brookman horse. Boy, I mean, 6 seconds go by and this son of a gun's at the calf shoots. And I mean, Clint is strung out. Of course, Clint always had the greatest attitude. Oh, gee, hey, I guess he didn't have his day. I said, I don't know. Coming from that country, maybe these bright lights just had him freaked out or something. I don't know, Clint. So then after the first 5 pens are over, because we set 5 pens, then we'll, and that, you know, run over it again and maybe move some horses here and there.
Yeah.
So so Kelly Wardell, he says, what do you think about this horse? I said, man, I don't know. I said, shoot, I don't know what happened there. I said, but man, this is a good horse. This is a nice rascal. Well, should we keep him there or move him up a pen or what? I said, man, he's bound to have his day. I said, I don't know what happened there. Lance Crump draws him in the same trip. And pretty soon after it's over, Kelly's kind of looking at me and I'm kind of getting the stink eye around. I said, I don't know. And then pretty soon somebody says, well, doesn't he have another one named Ace of Spades or something? So I said, I still can't tell you which one it was. And well, maybe. I told you the story.
I was a mess. I said it right there.
You're fired. We ain't listening to you anymore.
So they used to say that the way it used to work, because of the way the season went, was that the Cow Palace, everybody get in a room, lock the door, and they'd pick horses. And there'd be fist fights for horses or against horses. Is that legit? Did that ever happen?
Whew, I missed out on that, thank God.
Yeah. Maybe
either that or I showed up late for the meeting. I don't know.
Maybe you should have had a fist fight over the black horse of Brookman.
Well, no, it was just kind of discussions, but yeah, I don't remember any of that.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, maybe it was before that too.
It might have been before that, yeah.
But you guys all top 15 of you would sit down, or whoever was in the top 20 or had a chance.
Not just limited to the top 15, you know, I mean, because, but it would kind of go on before that too, you know, a little bit, you know, when the nomination list come out and, So, and that's just kind of how they all got set
Yeah.
in a sense. And I always thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Is pretty cool deal. And, you'd set 18,
Yeah.
3 of them for rerides.
Mm-hmm.
And you get down there and them 3 rerides, they're going to be good too.
Yeah.
Everything's going to be good.
Yeah, they're still NFR horses.
Heck yeah. Yeah.
So the way they do it now, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but what we have to do is we have to nominate them just like always.
Mhm.
And they've moved the date up to, I believe, the 1st of September is when our nominations are due. And so the season doesn't get over until the end of September. So,
Well, yeah, it all changed because it used to end at the Cow Palace. Well, Cow
Yeah.
Palace, Kansas City, and a bunch of others. But yeah, now it's way moved up, isn't it?
Yeah. But the weird thing now is that we have to have them nominated by the end of August, right? And so we don't get into our super heavy rodeo season until after we've already had to nominate them. So if we've got a young horse or something that's been badass all year, I mean, we know this is a long shot. We got to nominate way more than we think. And we would love to just nominate the ones that we know we got faith in then. But the way it works is if we take one to Pendleton or Lewiston, that filer that's not on the list, and they're 90 on them 5 times the end of the year, and they're not nominated, we look like idiots. But the nomination process is the same. It hasn't changed. And then the directors and the contestants pick them. And then it goes to a review board that Las Vegas Events has. So that's the NFR Livestock Selection Committee. And so now the people that are paying the bills, which is LVE, are kind of going through the list and they're watching the videos that we have to submit. So that's probably the reason that we have to submit videos is because you screwed up that Brookman horse.
They got a good camera angle?
Well,
Because it's nothing like watching them live. I don't care where you're at.
Oh,
but,
man, that's a fact,
Oh.
isn't it?
man, I didn't realize I had that much influence. But so I'm a Minnesota Vikings fan. Sometimes you got to have some claim to fame, 4 Super Bowls, no victories,
Yeah.
most interceptions.
It's still a completed pass, though.
Yeah, there you go. The way things fall in line.
Yeah, but that camera angle deal, that's something else, too. That's amazing
Yeah.
what changes just with a camera angle.
Oh, shoot. Even get to help you guys out there at Billings at the rodeo, the fair and whatnot, man, that's so fun. When you're right there, it's you can't get a view anything like that.
Yeah.
And then when you're competing, and you usually getting the heck out of the way anyway, but still there's going to be a chance. Heck, I remember in San Antonio one time, I was coming back, Wayne Herman, and we were traveling together.
Mm-hmm.
He ended up being the next bareback rider, and so I was just getting back to the chutes. I wasn't all the way out of the way, and Wayne comes out, and so I just got up against the chutes, kind of by that center out gate, and watched that horse. And that horse made a circle around to the right, and I mean, just the elevation. I mean, there's not a lot of people out there could really turn both toes out
Yeah.
like Wayne Herman.
Yeah.
And beating this horse to the ground by a mile. And it was the most amazing thing. Those are things that stick in your mind
Yeah.
of what you want to do. And man, it was an incredible ride. But yeah, that view right there is something that you really feel bad for the paying public,
Mm-hmm.
what they don't really get to see that.
Yeah.
And anybody out there that wants to complain about agriculture,
Judging.
farming, or how these horses are treated, they have absolutely no clue what they're talking about. And that's probably the biggest disgusting thing. And it's been around since Great Aunt Alice's and Aunt Marge and Turk and my grandpa.
Yeah.
It's been around forever.
Yeah.
And one more family member while I'm thinking about it, and we'll keep back at what we're going. But Chuck Henson was Aunt Margie's son. Heavy
Really?
Henson and Aunt Marge were married, and Chuck Henson fought bulls at the finals for was for a lot of years,
Yeah.
and was still fighting bulls in Tucson when I was going earlier. And
Yeah.
and before microphones, funny, he was tall. He's built out of a little different cloth than most of us Greenos. He was tall, great big hand. Oh, God, he was just hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was. he was funny, but you know, and they all go through that, but it's going to be around forever,
Yeah.
you know. And
Well,
but
let's hold on a minute and back up to the camera angle deal. Just like you telling that story, everybody wants to complain about judging. First of all, throw your name in the hat and be a judge. Not justifying all of the judging to everybody, but it's so much different when you're watching on the Cowboy Channel or when you're watching it on the ground.
oh, exactly.
It is way different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a whole different ball game.
Yeah. But where you're going, like with animal rights, animal welfare stuff.
Oh, it's here to stay, I'm sure. You know, it's going to be around. It has been forever.
Yeah.
And you know, but it's the ridiculousness of it. You know, man, to each their own.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, don't be poking your nose into somebody else's business that takes care of their animals. And like I say, we won't mention how many legs they got again. I know we can't do that, but I mean, they're out there in the sunshine and
four or more.
And they look good and amazing. You know, fleshed out and feeling good. I mean, shoot. Animals are animals.
Yeah.
You know, and humans are humans. And we all have different strokes, you know. Man, take your ideas and keep it with you.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, but because you can't talk to them.
Well,
You can't.
yeah. And so this is something in my profession that I have to face a lot.
Yeah.
And it is super simple. Everybody's got their own perspective. That's a new word that the world has came up with lately is perspective. I've got mine and they've got theirs. And just because theirs and mine don't jive and align doesn't mean that they're wrong, doesn't mean that I'm wrong. But for them to come tell me that I'm wrong doing this without coming and seeing it firsthand, that's wrong. If they come check it out, come learn about it, know the animals, know the lifestyle, know the culture, and then it's still wrong, then they're welcome to that opinion. But it's just like us. I don't even know how to judge or how to pick a subject to judge them on that says they're incorrect. But it's just like us, like you said, getting in the middle of their business and telling them how to do it.
Much as you want mine to pick on their appearance sometimes, you probably dare not.
It's fact, right?
You know?
Yeah.
Geez, how many colts did we buck up here this summer?
Um,
Holy smokes.
yeah, 18.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and
Yep.
it took a while.
Yep.
And that's what they don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
They don't understand. And I've talked about that a lot too.
Yeah.
And I mean, just the setup you got out here. And if they were ever just kind of, you know, really be able to just watch how you guys operate, it's pretty mellow.
Yeah.
It's pretty mellow. I mean, them horses, they'll read you.
Yeah.
They're broncs and they're big,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I mean, that's just what they are. But, you know, you're going to run across those ones that just soon come up there and have you scratch their butt or scratch them under the chin.
Yeah.
Not all of them, but you're not going to get all the saddle horses in the world that'll do that either.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, some of them, you just want to get them brushed up, saddled up, lead them out a little bit and get on and go do your business.
Yeah.
They're not going to be sitting there, any of this cuddling. You know, they're not like that.
Yeah.
You know, they all got different personalities. Bulls are the same way.
Yeah.
You know, gee whiz. They have no clue.
Yeah. I remember,
Dogs, cats.
Yeah. Not
Cats you can't judge. I swear, you cannot judge a cat. You don't know what they want to do.
just like the mules we were talking about earlier, right?
Oh, I thought that was a Sasquatch. I heard that holler. I thought, man, we're going to be on YouTube. Heck, we're on a podcast. We got a live Sasquatch out here at the Sankey Ranch. Yeah, I seen him. Big ears. Couldn't get my phone to work. I'd be famous.
Got a picture, but it's real grainy.
It's grainy. Oh, how'd we get here? Just the way the world is. Oh, might have something to do with it. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
fizz and apple cider. I don't know if I've ever had that.
Oh, it's
before.
just mine's just juice.
Yeah, good.
Yeah,
Good stuff.
not bad. All natural.
All natural.
So what?
They don't use almond juice or anything like that, do they?
Takes too long to juice the almonds.
Yeah.
So what about rodeo stories?
Oh, geez.
Like traveling. Who did you rodeo with most of the time? I know you went with Cleve.
Yeah, finished up with Cleve.
Yeah.
About the first couple years, well, the first year for sure was Jay Kirkland, and then, God dang it, he got hurt again.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah. So in '88, Jay got hurt kind of later on in the summer.
So was he older than you?
Yeah.
So
And,
you got in with some guys that were rodeoing.
Oh, here you go. Chuck and Chuck. Chuck Logue and Chuck Simonson.
Oh boy.
Boy, you want to talk about your first year on the trail going hard, you know. And of course, I was older. I was a late bloomer. I wasn't young and going hard. I was more of a late bloomer.
Well, how did you end up going with Chuck Logue from Texas?
Well, because I was talking to Chuck and Chuck, and they were traveling together.
Mm-hmm.
And Chuck Simonson says, "Well, hell, Debbie, hell, we'll enter you, shoot, jump in, you know, give Chuck your card, we'll get you down the road." Oh, he was tough. Man, that was a tough guy. That Chuck Simonson just was. So I did, and yeah, that opened my eyes to pro rodeo there. Them two, oh my God, they were funny. And beat on each other and, oh God, and laugh and giggle the whole time. It was good. But so yeah, I traveled with them, finished out the year there. Then the next year I ended up with Colin Murnion.
Mm-hmm.
And that was fun. You know, Colin, he was always so serious, you know, he was kind of like traveling with your dad. I mean, everything you said made sense. He'd chew my butt about certain things. And, well, yeah, I am kind of a kid acting son of a gun, I guess. But he'd line me out. But, oh, man, we traveled good together. Then after that, you know, then Colin got hurt too. And then, so it would have been like 91 and 92. Where there was really no bareback riders going hard in Montana, you know, and you just can't drive all them miles by yourself. That's just not going to work.
It's not feasible.
You know, yeah, you can't do it. So got really good at, you know, finding out when I was up, and then I'd start calling, you know, around. And I was living in Helena at the time, you know, headed south. I'd be looking for anybody in Montana headed south. And if there was nobody there, I'd call I'd find out what the Canadians were. Mm-hmm. And Helena was a pretty good deal on I-15 there.
Yeah.
So shoot, yeah, I caught rides for 2 years.
Yeah.
You know, all across the country and U.S. and Canada. And shoot, one time down in Houston, rode in Houston, found some guy, because you start asking right away. Once you get into the first one's kind of tough. After that, getting to the rest of them is easy because you can always find somebody going. And getting home was kind of tough sometimes. But always made it. Only had to ride the old shame train, the old Greyhound 3 times. That was it. But went from Houston to Kissimmee and caught a ride with a bunch of bronc riders, 2 carloads of bronc riders in rental cars. And then, of course, we got in Louisiana, and one of them missed the turn off in the swamp. We went, and we had to push that car out. That was the first time I realized that some cars are front-wheel drive because we're trying to push it backwards. Oh, man, that old black mud all over you. Got to Kissimmee, rode there, had a ride lined up back to Houston right away because I was needing to get to Tucson, but I had 2 days to do it. But still, it dang near that much getting there. Mm-hmm. So caught a ride from Kissimmee as soon as I was done there, and my ride was ready to go. Pulled into Houston Hobby Airport, and some of the guys stayed at a hotel down there in Houston, and because guys kind of stay where everybody stays. Pulled in there, breaking daylight, and out come Marvin and Mark Garrett, Ken Lensgraff, and I don't think Larry was with them at the time. And they come walking across the parking lot, and I said, "Where are you guys headed?" They said, "Tucson." I said, "You got a hole?" And they said, "Yeah." I jumped out of another car, jumped in there, got to Tucson, and I wasn't going to be up, then. But shoot, we was able to get a hotel room, and whatnot. And next day, went and rode in Tucson, and caught a ride back.
Yeah.
Yeah, caught a ride back to Montana, in fact, after Tucson.
So what about growing up here and going all them rodeos? Like, what time of year did you start going? Like, when did you buy your permit?
Got my permit in '86. And then
Spring, fall?
Kind of filled it through the summer circuit.
Yeah.
But that's when I was always going down to Cody too.
Mm-hmm.
When you guys had the Cody Night Rodeo, shoot, I'd go NRA Rodeos, our Northern Rodeo Association, the Amateur Association.
Yeah.
I'd enter any pro rodeo I could get into, priority, so I could fill my permit. NRA Rodeos over top, along with that, and then go down to Cody 2-3 times a week.
Yeah.
So you're getting on. Well, shoot, I could handle it then. Youth is a wonderful gift.
Yeah.
and it sure beat working.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of how I filled my permit in '87, and then '86, and then '87. Well, actually '85. '86 was my rookie year, and that's another deal. The rookie of the year should go to the true rookie. My rookie year was a wreck. I mean, Jiminy Crickets, by the end of the summer, I couldn't ride a stick horse to water. I was a mess, what a deal. And then '87, shooting with Dad quite a bit, made me start thinking about riding a lot more. And then coming from Regina in 1987, I entered it with Colin, which is the rodeo right before the NFR starts. And anybody that was an NFR qualifier, they got priority over that first performance in Regina, Saskatchewan.
Oh, so they could go, yeah.
Yeah, and so I buddied with Colin, so we got up in that first performance, and Clint was in the bull riding, and they both made the finals for the first time that year in '87.
Mm-hmm.
And so I rode up there with those guys, left there winning it, ended up second after the whole week was over, but I remember coming back, and we got to Laurel, and that's where I had my pickup at the town pump there in Laurel. And Clint had that black van that he won up there in Canada in that one series, and said, "Well, all right, you guys," they were headed on to Vegas. So they dropped me off at that pickup, and I'm sitting, it's cold. I mean, miserable. I got that pickup warming up, and they went in the town pump there and got some coffee and some snacks, and that little, entrance to the interstate in Laurel, you got to make that little horseshoe run to get on it to go west.
Yep.
And by that time, the windows were starting to kind of unfog in my pickup, and I looked and I watched them taillights heading all the way over that bridge in that nice warm van. And I said, "Man, next year that van is not leaving me behind. I'm going." And it worked out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the 2 years I just caught rides with a lot of different people.
Yeah.
Denny McClanahan, I met him for the first time. I could have swore he was in the Army all the whole time. Later on, after I got to know him, he told me, "No," he says, "I bought that at an Army surplus store. I was never in the Army." But Denny. Oh my God. He looked like he'd be a little Army. Well, I tell you what, you imagine him in a foxhole somewhere and things were going right. He'd probably jump out of that son of a gun and go attack everybody on the other side. They'd never hit him. Oh, geez. And yeah, then after that, Scott Jasaric, John Schroff.
Yeah.
And Scott Lund, a lot of guys in Montana were, younger guys were coming up, and shoot, we'd go to a lot of the winter rodeos together.
Yeah.
And then in the summertime, then everybody'd kind of be splitting up a little bit, but there was always plenty to go. Marty Buckingham out of Mile City, he'd go to quite a few, rode good.
Yeah.
And then, eventually, and Wayne Herman, shoot, we traveled for a couple of years together. Gosh, that was fun.
Yeah.
But still in rodeo, you're still catching rides.
Yeah.
A lot of times, shoot, Cleve might make the short round and I might not. So he'd catch rides, or I'd take the pickup, or vice versa, or whatever. But Cleve and I, we traveled quite a few years together.
How many rodeos were you going to?
That first year I went in '88, you could count 150. And I entered every one of them. I didn't make them all, of course, because you'd get doubled up on entries, like, on the 4th of July, how that kind of goes and stuff like that. And you'd get doubled up. But yeah, and I was traveling with Chuck, and he was on the bubble that year. He didn't make the finals, Chuck Logue, that year, which was kind of a bum deal. But what happens. And And he said they better watch out next year. Yep, he ends up winning the world,
Man, that guy was so scary.
Oh man, yeah, 1990. Yeah. Oh geez.
I remember being a little kid and seeing Chuck behind the chutes, and you know how he just stand there. He'd go tack one up, and he'd just stand there, and he'd just spur his leg, just stand there and just spur his leg with one foot, and then with the other foot, and just be staring, just blank, far away, look in his eye. And I remember standing there watching Chuck, thinking to myself, like, God damn. I'm glad I'm not
on him.
I'm glad
Twice
I'm not
as big
a horse.
around as anybody.
That guy is terrifying.
And then when he slide up there, he looked like the $6 million man. Because he got that mustache. He'd slide up there. You could hear from the old show, ba-na-na-na-na-na, the way that play that music. Man, I mean, he slide up there. I mean, when he knocked it. That free hand and fingers and spread, man, he could hold his feet. That guy,
he meant it.
He had a power. Oh my gosh, yeah, he's an animal.
Yeah,
there's no doubt there.
So I was gonna ask you a long time ago, but like you grew up around Montana, going to these little rodeos, just like everybody, regardless where you're from. And then you got to take the next step up. Like, was there ever a culture shock? Was there ever something that was just the bright lights too big? Like, do you remember that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think one of the biggest things that you kind of noticed, I mean, we had some pretty good amateur rodeos. We had a pretty good amateur rodeo association in Montana. High school rodeos, typical. I mean, them poor parents sitting in them bleachers, hot, long, draw it out.
Or cold
and you
snowy.
might have some cheering and some clapping going on, during the performance or whatever, for their kids or whatever. But that's the only people in the bleachers. And then in the amateur deals, you would get some people and there'd be some cheering and kind of action going on. But the first pro rodeo I went to, I could not believe it. How loud the crowd was.
Do you remember the first pro rodeo?
Well, it was just one in Montana, and I think, one of them I could even think of would be like Drummond.
Yeah.
So really, Missoula wasn't as huge as it is now.
Yeah.
But at that time, there was a lot of people that weren't born and raised in Montana. California rodeos, holy cow. You want to talk about cheering?
Mm-hmm.
They just do. I mean, from the start to finish. I mean, they're a great crowd.
Yeah.
Montana, for the most part, you got a bunch of ranchers and they'll be sitting there like they're watching a tennis match. Oh, what do you think of that ride? Well, I tell you, he could have reached up there to him. By God, that guy rides good, though. What do you think? Oh, yeah, he rides good. I mean, that's the kind of crowd you're going to get around.
Them damn judges.
Yeah. Yeah, so... then you get to places where, well, even like that one they got in Bozeman now.
Yeah.
Holy smokes, they're cheering from the get-go. Has a lot to do with culture and TV. I think Yellowstone probably brought a lot of that back again, kind of like the Urban Cowboy days. That was a long time ago. I was grade school then, junior high, but
yeah.
I mean, everything went crazy then, but oh, geez. Yeah, so, but the one culture shock you want to talk about, I think, or in my mind, my answer was like, I wished I'd have focused a little more on bronc riding, because man, when you get to the pro level, and today, man, there are there's great bareback riders too, but I was able to, be a part of that, and amazing bull riders. But the bronc riding has just always kind of been such a classic event. They call it that for a reason. Looking at those pictures in that Miles City saddlery and all them bronc riders, and man, just them toes cranked out and stuff. Man, I wish that I look back and I wished I'd have pursued that a little harder. But what the heck, you can sit back and look at life like that, and I still ride them in my sleep,
You know what's crazy is that everybody you talk to, like, I know Richie Champion's got a similar story, except his is looking back. Like, he wanted to be a bull rider, ended up being a premier bareback rider. I don't think I wanted to be a bronc rider, and I was a good bareback rider, and I hated that fact. because of the same thing. I mean, I wanted to be a bronc rider, but in rodeo, it's crazy how everybody starts out. Stetson Jorgensen, NFR Bulldogger, I don't know how many times, but he rode broncs in college. Everybody in rodeo, it seems like they start out one direction and end up being successful somewhere else. It's crazy like that. But you ended up being a successful bareback rider. Still wish you would have rode broncs better.
Yeah. Once you kind of watch it and you watch those guys that ride good, thinking, well, it took me a while to figure out how to kind of work my feet a little bit in the bareback riding, but if I'd have figured that out, of course, the bronc riding, as you know, man, you'll take some worse fart knockers than that when you're learning
Oh, yeah.
than anything.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
You get the booger treatment, hang a foot in a stirrup, like flicking a booger off the end of your finger.
Yeah.
Oh, man, you can hit hard. Yeah, Scott Bredding, holy smokes, you know what, he could turn his toes out in the bull riding anyway.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that guy could ride broncs pretty.
Yeah.
But, yeah, he didn't like them.
Yeah.
No. Of course, the way he can tell a story too, with his expressions. Oh gosh, he can tell some good bronc riding stories. It's funny.
How bad?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you talked about bareback riders and being a bareback rider at that level. Me and my sister have been having this conversation. Like, we're talking about bareback riders and the community that they've created are similar to bulldoggers and the community they've created now. You got tie-down ropers. World's going to hear this, but I'm going to be publicly correct and say they're not all about the community. They're a little more about their own success. Team ropers a little bit. Bulldoggers, bulldoggers don't care who wins first. They want everybody to succeed.
Yeah.
And where I'm going with this is like bareback riders, they're a set of, badasses. Like, being in the locker room at the NFR is the coolest place I've ever been in my life, just because of how good those guys get along and what they're fighting for, and mentally how they're approaching it, and what they're going through. Everybody's going through something different at that stage in their life. But just how tight bareback riders have always been is where I'm trying to go with this. And it's always been like that. It's been like that as far as I can remember. It was like that when you were rodeoing, wasn't it?
Oh, I think so. I think everything like that's kind of tight. Where I kind of was coming in, one of those other eras was kind of leaving. Like with Rick Smith and, Clinton Johnson, he was kind of younger at that time. But a lot of those guys, they always made sure they did stay in kind of the same hotels.
Yeah.
And, there was guitar pickings, there was football, football games, basketball games. I can remember being in Tucson there one year, and all of a sudden I could hear something breathing like a freight train, and there was Rod Lyman foot racing somebody for a little extra money,
And I bet he won.
But, and then shoot there over across from Tucson there, they had that park, and basketball hoops and everything. It got busy. It got busy for the better, but, kind of that one era where everybody was kind of a group and they were there for a couple of days and people were around each other a lot more. That was long gone, for quite a while, but
Yeah.
that would have been an interesting era too.
Yeah.
As the way things have kind of went, it'd be pretty interesting. I got to go over to Australia one time on an invite, and it was a lot like that over there. Because that's such a big continent, and them rodeos, there wasn't a lot of them, so it's not a, going and a blowing situation. But they'd come in there for 2-3 days, and hang out.
Kind of a traveling road show sort of feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, it's pretty cool. Yeah, I think, that's what a guy misses. And then we talked about this way earlier, like, how do we lose track of each other like that after everything, we did and hung out with? Well, yeah, you just do, I guess. And
Yeah.
oofta.
Yeah. Well, that's something about rodeo I hope never changes.
Oh, I don't think it will.
I don't think it can.
Yeah. I don't. Yeah, I don't think so because it's still independent enough. I mean, there's money out there, but you still got to go get it.
Yeah.
Sponsorships are something was kind of coming in, as I was going out, but man, they got big now.
Mm-hmm.
That helps a lot. It really does. There's going to be guys like me that probably could add a huge sponsorship nowadays and really not know what to do with it. There's going to be guys like Dan Mortensen who knew exactly what to do with that money.
Yeah.
It's like, woohoo, holy cow.
Yeah.
But that's the walk of life, no matter what business you're in, I guess.
Yeah.
But no, it's good. It's all good. And geez, yeah, you can't say enough good about it, really.
Yeah.
Holy cow. What a life. Gee whiz. I can't drive as far as I used to. Geez, I get out now. I'm kind of stiffened up. Used to be able to jump out, photo finishing something and run over there. Get on right away. It wouldn't matter. Now I might have to stretch a little.
Maybe it's not the age. Maybe it's just the motivation.
Oh, I'm still shooing. There's still enough motivation. I just know better. I did get on one a year after I quit. That reminds me. At a school there in Arlee. R.T. Hendrickson, we always put on a school.
Yeah.
So we'd go through the first day and go over equipment, do all the kind of stuff, and at least get them on one by the end of the first day, because bareback riggings back then, there's a lot of work in them. They didn't have that little putty, you could put in there. Had to use leather.
Yeah.
And cover it all up, make it look good.
Hide it.
Yeah,
Make it legal.
They don't have to hide nothing anymore. Son of a gun. They got, look like the Hulk's glove or something. I don't know. That's crazy. But so anyway, do that. And so then the next day, okay, here's the deal. What can we review here? This and that. You've had a chance to get on one and listen, because it takes a while. That's the way I always was. So I treated them like that. So at least get them on one before lunch, go through equipment again and make sure everything's feeling comfortable, where they're safe enough to hang on, but safe enough to get out.
Yep.
And so then get them all on one, and we'd go have lunch. So then right after lunch, we'd come back. I said, okay, I've always needed to see things. I talked about Wayne Herman, watching that ride he made, watching a lot of different guys, you learn a lot from watching. It makes sense. So I said, okay, I'm just going to go through everything. And it takes a long time at a school. It just does.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to show you how fluent you can be through this. And so I just go ahead and I just do everything, hook my rig and do everything. And your dad always said the more stuff you could do by yourself, the better. So I learned how to pull my own rigging and everything, hook my own rigging and do all that kind of stuff. And it really helps. But I'd show them how to do all that. And that's a year later, because we wanted to do one more school. So all right, everything's kind of going. I'm saying, all right. And then here's the deal. I'm running my hand in, we're just, all right, that horse is out of the arena. And I said, flank man, he's going to tell you, some are going to be yelling at you, but you're just making sure. And they're usually, yep, everything's clear. We good? Yep, we're good. And then you just go ahead and find your balance point in there, walk up there and slide up there and nod your face and go for it. And I would do that as I was talking and then leave, just because you could. Your mind worked that good. Set my feet, held them for two. Thought, man, this feels pretty good. Kind of started building my ride. Heck, this feels good. It's got this buck kind of picked up here. All right, I'm going to let her hang. Boy, I let my feet come. I heard more stuff popping and cracking in my body I've never heard before. So went ahead and finished out the ride, got off the pickup, man. I'm kind of walking back like John Wayne. I'm a little bit crooked in the neck, but dang sure can't let them see you sweat.
But you look really tough.
So come Sunday, the final day, yeah, I was sore, but you still can't see them. I thought, man, I tell you what, your mind can stay in shape a lot longer than your body can. There's no way to really train for it.
Yeah.
Without just getting on pretty much. Oh, shoot. I guess, yeah. How many do I go to? Probably 90, 90 rodeos I'd probably go to, but you about double that through short rounds, 3 rounds in a short, this and that. So, about double that. You're looking at 180 head a year.
Yeah.
There's only 360 some days in a year, so really you don't have that many days off, but that's enough to keep you in shape.
Yeah.
Well, when you go home, do you practice? Heck no. I got 2 days off. I'm all right, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, right. You know, being in riding shape is a whole different deal than sitting there for a while and thinking about it. Just like even tearing the shoulder up back to shoeing now. Holy Christ. I'm starting to feel like I was when I was with Dad. I'm got to get myself back in shape. But everything's like that. Even like with framing. I mean, you'd be framing or whatever and you'd be in shape for that. Then next thing you know, you're walking walls and setting trusses, and then
Yeah.
it's a whole different set of muscles.
Yeah.
Everything's different.
Yeah.
I don't know how we ended up there framing again, but oh well.
Favorite pastime?
Yeah. Still get to do a little of that sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not so much like I used to. When shoeing season used to slow down in the wintertime, then I'd just be driving along, find a job site going on, and I'd pull in there and, you guys need any extra help for the winter? Well, what can you do? Well, I can show up on time, stay up my cell phone, give you a full day's work. You're hired.
Yeah.
I made a lot of good friends in the construction business doing that, just working for them,
Mm-hmm.
And oh my gosh,
Yeah,
what a
just showing
blast.
up.
What a blast.
Yeah.
One guy, Colin Lardy Construction, that Shiloh Commons, them 4 big buildings on Shiloh, kind of apartments with the stores underneath of them. They were
Okay.
just starting those. And it was getting winter, and I talked to this guy, and I said, where's your boss? And they pointed over to tall guy, big guy. And I went over there and I introduced myself and talked to him. He said, what can you do? So I give him the spiel. Well, all right. How much money are you looking for? So we talked about some money. All right. Something. I said, well, I've probably got, good solid week and a half of shoeing yet, but I wanted to, make sure that I probably had an opportunity. If you got, yeah, we'll take you. So yeah, just be here, at this time, when you're done. I said, okay. So I'm walking away and he grilled me. I mean, he was kind of intimidating because he's pretty big and lean. And I was walking away. He says, how are your knees? I said, oh, well, they're okay. Then he started laughing. He says, I know who you are. But we had more fun, man, working for that guy. I mean, what a good guy. And he's got cattle too and everything. And
What's that line off of Major League? How's your knees? Oh, good, Skip. You tell me the truth? You better if you think I'd bullshit you on something like that? You better if you want to make this team, he says.
yeah,
Pretty similar.
Pretty similar. Just depends.
Yeah.
Mm-mm-mm.
Well, I guess probably better wrap her up, huh?
Well, been good. Shoot, thanks.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Deb Greenough, World Champion Bareback Rider, one of my best friends.